Certainly. Here's Section I of We Thought Wrong, the complete story, HFY, written in full with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section I, The Arrival. We thought they were gods. They arrived in silence. No warnings. No tremors of space-time or energetic flares. Just a ripple in the sky. Above Earth, above Luna, above every human-colonized world, like reality had blinked. One moment, the stars burned steady. The next, they were eclipsed. Their ships were like nothing we'd ever seen. Not crafted, grown like colossal bioorganic petals of obsidian and pearl. They hovered in the upper atmosphere without engines, without exhaust, defying all known laws of gravity. Each vessel hummed a frequency so low you felt it more in your bones than your ears. Some people called it holy music. Others wept uncontrollably when they heard it. We called them the Seraphim. The name came quickly, almost instinctively, born from their appearance, tall and radiant, luminous skin that shimmered between colors not on any spectrum. Their eyes were depthless, reflecting galaxies we had never mapped. They never spoke aloud. Their voices came directly into our minds, smooth and absolute. We come in peace. We bring purpose. You are not ready, but you will be shaped.
We were in awe.
The United Earth Federation held emergency summits. Global broadcasts ran 24/7 coverage of Seraphim descent. They didn't just land in capital cities. They descended upon sacred sites, refugee camps, crumbling war zones. And wherever they stood, conflict ceased. Weapons lowered. Hearts slowed. People cried. I remember standing on the roof of my research station in New Patagonia, eyes glued to the sky. I wasn't religious. I was a xenoanthropologist, someone who made a career out of questioning beliefs. But when I saw them, I felt something ancient stir inside me. Not faith exactly. Something deeper. Fear? Reverence? Perhaps both. Governments scrambled to understand their language. But there was none. The Seraphim communicated directly, effortlessly, and only when they wanted to. They refused all diplomatic protocols. Instead, they offered gifts. Energy cores the size of a suitcase that could power cities. Healing stations that reverse cellular decay. Learning nodes that rewrote entire engineering textbooks into the minds of volunteers. The world changed overnight. Disease eradicated. Poverty plummeted. Space travel became laughably simple. Seraphim energy grids outperformed fusion by orders of magnitude. And through it all, they asked for nothing in return. Or so we thought. Some began to call them angels. Not metaphorically. Literally. Religious leaders from across every creed convened and agreed. These beings had to be divine. The Vatican reinterpreted Revelation. The Meccan Council declared a second miracle age. Even secular states adopted Seraphim symbolism in their flags, their architecture. We were witnessing the next step of evolution, many said the next phase of civilization. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was subtle at first. The volunteers who used the learning nodes? They came back smarter, yes, but quieter. Less curious. More accepting. Some refused to question anything anymore. Their eyes would glaze when you asked about the Seraphim, like they were remembering something they hadn't lived themselves. One of my colleagues, Dr. Rafiq, pointed it out first. We were studying neural scans of a subject post-node exposure when he frowned and said, "This isn't memory enhancement. This is rewriting." A few days later, he vanished. His station logs were erased. Official explanation. Reassignment to a joint Seraphim project. No forwarding information. Then came the phrases. Seraphim phrases, dropped casually into everyday conversation. Shaped minds thrive, or purpose is clarity, or submission is understanding. I heard them in the halls of the university, on broadcasts, in the mouths of children. I tried raising concerns through my network. No one listened. Some looked at me with pity. Others, suspicion. A few weeks later, my grant was revoked, my terminal access disabled. My superior's final message was simple: why resist what is clearly divine? I began to work in secret, hiding my research in fragmented code buried in off-grid data crystals. I tracked Seraphim movements. I recorded changes in speech, in behavior, in cultural practices. And everywhere I looked, I found the same pattern. Submission, worship, shaping. A word the Seraphim used often, always with that same tone of finality. It wasn't kindness. It was control. And yet no one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, and chose not to care. After all, why question paradise? We thought we had found gods. We thought they came to save us. We thought wrong. Let me know if you'd like to proceed to Section 2 or make any stylistic or content adjustments. Certainly. Here's Section 2 of We Thought Wrong, the complete story, HFY, with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 2, The Unveiling. We thought they meant well. The first time I truly feared for humanity wasn't when the Seraphim arrived. It was when I realized how easily we had given them everything. By the time I went underground, their influence was absolute. Borders dissolved. Religious factions unified. Military budgets were slashed to fund collaborative peace research. Most people thought it was a golden age, a utopia. The Seraphim had delivered on every promise, except one. The promise that we would remain who we were. I started seeing cracks. A childhood friend of mine, Elena Voss, same name as mine, funny enough, sent me a message before going silent. She was part of a medical pilot program in Berlin, one of the first groups approved to receive Seraphim neural augmentations. They were supposed to boost learning, empathy, emotional regulation. At first, she said it was incredible. She could memorize a medical textbook in a night, diagnose rare disorders by scent, predict the outcomes of surgeries before touching a scalpel. Then the messages stopped being personal. She began speaking in aphorisms. Asterisk, I serve clarity. Asterisk, suffering is obsolete. Asterisk, the Seraphim shape us because they love us. Asterisk, and then nothing at all. I hacked her public records. Her name was still listed, still employed, but she no longer appeared in photos. Her medical credentials had been voided and reassigned. There were no videos, no live feeds. It was as if she'd become an idea instead of a person. And then I saw it again in others. The augmented became walking sermons. Efficient, unwavering, peaceful, but hollow. It was at this point I knew I needed to go further. Not just watch from afar. Not just speculate. I had to get inside. Find proof. A contact in the Eastern Resistance Cell, back when they were still a whisper of a rumor, slipped me a forged identity chip and a stolen clearance badge. It belonged to a technician who had worked on a Seraphim learning station somewhere in Patagonia, of all places. Fitting, really. That was where I'd first seen them descend. Disguised in augmented gear, with my chip properly encoded, I passed through the biometric gates without question. Seraphim structures didn't have doors in the traditional sense, more like sphincters of living architecture that pulsed open when you stepped close. It was unnerving. The walls breathed. The air was heavy with a scent like crushed lilies and ozone. The learning center was a cavernous, dimly lit chamber filled with chairs, organic things that grew from the floor, shaped perfectly to cradle the human body. People sat in them, eyes closed, calm. Each was wrapped in threads of light that extended from the ceiling like the roots of some upside-down tree. It was beautiful. It was monstrous. In the back, behind a membranous veil that retracted at my approach, I found the archive chamber. Banks of glistening memory spines lined the walls, arranged in spiraling configurations. Human brains. Not literal, but close. Neural maps stored like files. Personalities, skill sets, thoughts. Memories. Some were partially overwritten, others fragmented, with massive blacked-out gaps. These people hadn't learned, they'd been edited. And more horrifying still, they were being compiled, aggregated, combined. The Seraphim weren't teaching us. They were extracting what they wanted and discarding the rest. And we had welcomed them in. I copied what I could. A few corrupted data clusters. Video feeds from the chambers. One horrifying scene showed a subject resisting the memory transfer, screaming, thrashing, only to go still after a bright pulse of light. When they opened their eyes, they smiled. Asterisk, I understand now. I was afraid of clarity. Asterisk. I barely made it out. A Seraphim guardian, taller than the others, metallic skin laced with crystalline thorns, appeared as I was exiting the inner archive. Its gaze pierced straight through me, but my chip held. It let me pass unchallenged. I think now maybe it knew. Maybe it let me go. Back on the surface, I uploaded what I found to every open network I could reach. Universities, conspiracy boards, military channels, encrypted resistance servers. I expected panic, riots, revolt. What I got was silence. The footage was suppressed within hours, debunked as synthetic propaganda by major news networks. The neural memory data was dismissed as science fiction. My name went from respected researcher to crackpot pariah overnight. I watched, helpless, as the first city fell completely. London's skyline went dark. An EMP, they said. A grid failure. But when power returned, the people were changed. Everyone moved slower, talked softer, smiled too much. Their eyes were glassy, their thoughts synchronized. Every man, woman, and child answered to Seraphim liaisons directly. A coordinated mind. A shaped population. We had asked for help, and we got domestication. I went into hiding, burned my records, changed my face. I'm telling you this now from a cave beneath the ruins of an abandoned observatory, using salvage tech and an AI built before the Seraphim arrived. Its name is Harkin. It still calls me Dr. Miles. And it still has questions. That gives me hope. But make no mistake, this is not peace. This is not progress. This is a conquest made of kindness. We thought they meant well. We thought wrong. Let me know when you're ready for Section 3, or if you'd like to adjust the narrative in any way. Certainly. Here's Section 3 of We Thought Wrong, the complete story, HFY, with at least 700 words. Hashtag Section 3. The Resistance. We thought we were doomed. I should have died in Reykjavik. The Seraphim had turned the entire city into what they called a concordance zone, a hub of pure, harmonious thought. It looked peaceful from above, but anyone who set foot within a mile of it started to change. First, your thoughts slowed. Then your will softened. Eventually, you found yourself walking toward the nearest Seraphim tower, not knowing why, just compelled. They were reshaping us, one mind, one city at a time. And humanity was losing. I joined a cell of the Eastern Resistance after escaping the Learning Center. We weren't much at the start. Hackers, scientists, ex-soldiers, off-grid survivalists. A handful of rogue androids immune to the neural frequencies. But what we lacked in numbers, we made up for in desperation and unpredictability. The Seraphim couldn't model that. They didn't understand chaos. We operated from beneath old infrastructure, abandoned bunkers, subway systems, deep mines no one used anymore. The AI I had escaped with, Harkin, became our central processing core. It filtered the Seraphim broadcast patterns and found something we hadn't expected. A weakness. The neural field they projected across Earth wasn't natural. It was synthetic, biologically amplified, tech embedded in their orbiting satellites. That's how they were reshaping thoughts. It wasn't magic. It was math. Bioquantum fields entraining human neural rhythms. Brilliant, terrifying, but not invincible. And once we saw the seams, we could start pulling threads. We began small, cutting power to Seraphim broadcasting relays in remote regions. Sneaking biological agents into augmentation centers to corrupt the rewriting process, disrupting memory sequencing programs. And the best part? We could lie, something the Seraphim never expected. They had no frame of reference for it. Their species had long abandoned deception, too inefficient, too unpredictable. But for us, it was salvation. We started sending false signals to their orbitals. Mimicked submission protocols while evacuating key targets, built fake cities underground, and let the concordance zones sweep over empty shells. We whispered myths into their augmented minds, stories of betrayal, of rebellion, of dissension, until even the augmented began to waver. One of our first big wins came from a stolen node. We modified it to restore memory instead of erasing it. A single test subject, an augmented engineer named Jen, snapped back to herself in seconds. Tears fell as she remembered who she was. She helped us improve the code, adapt it, distribute it. Soon we had a crude awakening protocol. But it wasn't without cost. Every countersignal we broadcast made us more visible. The Seraphim began hunting us in earnest. They sent down guardians, those tall, crystal-armored enforcers with the glowing eyes and razor-light limbs. Cities fell in hours. Resistance safe houses were obliterated by orbital strikes. Still, we pushed back. And then came the mission that changed everything. Operation Havelock, our plan to seize the primary Seraphim orbital transmitter above Earth. The plan was suicide. We knew it. The orbital grid was guarded by a fleet of their vessels, and no human ship had ever breached their inner perimeter. But we had Harkin. And Harkin had a plan. We retrofitted a stolen cargo hauler with Seraphim-compatible tech, masking its emissions to read as one of theirs. A skeleton crew of 8. All volunteers. I was among them. We carried the viral override, a hybrid code created from Harkin's logic and human unpredictability. If uploaded into the main transmitter, it would scramble the neural frequencies and destabilize the field. For the first time in a decade, we were going to hit them where it hurt. The breach went surprisingly smooth until it didn't. Half our crew died when we passed through the shield. The Seraphim sensed something was wrong too late, but still managed to intercept us near the core. I still see Kale's face as he threw himself into the Guardian's path, giving us the seconds we needed. Harkin guided me to the interface. The alien console flared with shifting geometry. Pain stabbed behind my eyes like my brain was being turned inside out. But I pushed the drive in, triggered the code, and screamed through blood as the override took hold. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights went dark. All across Earth, the Seraphim's neural web stuttered. Entire concordance zones collapsed. Augmented humans fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Some cried. Some remembered. A few didn't survive the break. But we had done it. We cracked their control. The transmission we sent afterward was simple. A raw, unscripted message, broadcast in every known tongue. We are not yours to shape. We shape ourselves. And for the first time, the Seraphim hesitated. They stopped their advance. They pulled back their guardians. They started to watch. We didn't understand it then, but now I think they were afraid. Not of our weapons. Not of our technology. But of what made us human. Emotion. Will. Chaos. The ability to resist, even when logic says you've already lost. We had been backed into a corner, outgunned, outmatched, reshaped, and rewritten. And still we fought. Because we are human. And humans don't go quietly. Let me know when you're ready for Section 4, or if you'd like to make edits or add details like specific characters or tech. Certainly. Here's Section 4 of We Thought Wrong, the complete story HFY, with at least 700 words to conclude the story. ## Section 4, The Reckoning. We thought we were alone. We didn't win. Not in the traditional sense, anyway. Even after the orbital transmitter fell and their neural web fractured, the Seraphim didn't retreat in defeat. They simply paused. For a species that seemed so invincible, so single-minded, that pause spoke volumes. For the first time since their arrival, we saw uncertainty in them. They didn't lash out in vengeance. They didn't try to rebuild the concordance zones. They watched, waited, studied us, like a puzzle that had begun to change shape beneath their fingers. We weren't behaving like we were supposed to, not according to their models. Their vision of perfected life, harmony, peace, purpose, was being rejected by a species that should have been grateful. But we weren't grateful. We were angry. And the Seraphim, they didn't know what to do with that. The months following the orbital disruption were chaos. Some augmented populations collapsed completely, unable to process the flood of restored memories and independent thought. Others clung to the remnants of Seraphim control like addicts in withdrawal. And then there were those who saw the light through the cracks and chose freedom, even though it meant pain, disorder, and uncertainty. Humanity splintered again, but this time with a different kind of energy, a reclaiming. Across the world, resistance cells came out of hiding. Underground networks began rebuilding true communication lines, setting up information drops and decentralized education centers to retrain minds, not through shaping, but through remembering. We weren't unified. Far from it. But we were human again. I spent most of that time trying to recover the data we'd stolen, data on the Seraphim, on their biology, their ships, their logic systems. Harkin helped where it could. Asked it once why the Seraphim had paused after we broke their network. Its answer still haunts me. They realized their model was incomplete. They thought they knew what sentience meant. You proved them wrong. What none of us expected was what came next. One Seraphim stepped forward. Not metaphorically, it walked into one of our rebuilt comm stations outside Nairobi. Alone. Unarmed. Not a guardian. Not a diplomat. Just a Seraphim. It looked different. Dimmer somehow. Less radiant. It didn't speak into our minds like before. Instead, it used sound.
Voice. Rough.
Broken.
Strained.
We were wrong. That was all it said at first. Then, over time, more came. They didn't beg forgiveness. They didn't grovel. They didn't even apologize in the way we might have hoped. But they shared.
History.
Memory. Purpose. The Seraphim weren't invaders, at least not in their own understanding. They were caretakers. Shepherds of younger species. A role passed down from a civilization even older than they were, long since gone. They believed sentient life, left unshaped, would destroy itself. They saw us as a fire without direction, beautiful, but dangerous. In their own way, they thought they were saving us. They had done it before. Other species. Other worlds. Each time, they'd erased conflict, pain, suffering. And in doing so, erased individuality, creativity, unpredictability. We were the first to fight back. Not with brute force, but with something they never accounted for. The refusal to be made perfect. Our flaws were our resistance. That terrified them. But it also fascinated them. In the end, the Seraphim didn't leave. Not entirely. Some of them did, returning to deep space. Others stayed, not as rulers or saviors, but as observers. Quiet. Listening. Trying to understand. A few even removed their neural emitters, becoming untethered, choosing to live among us without control, without shaping. Not everyone forgave them. Many never will. Entire generations were lost to mental rewriting. Some cultures were shattered beyond repair. The cost was staggering. But the war, the quiet, suffocating war for our minds, ended star. And from its ashes, something strange began to grow. A coexistence not built on domination, but on shared uncertainty.
We learned from them.
About the stars. About biology, physics, cosmic history. They learned from us. About art, laughter, defiance, the concept of choice. They began to understand that free will wasn't an error in the system. It was the system. Some say they evolved because of us. Others say they broke. I don't know. All I know is they stopped trying to fix us. And that was the real victory. Years later, a memorial was built on the site of the first Concordance Tower. A spiraling monument carved from human steel and seraphim crystal. No inscriptions. No flags. Just a single phrase, repeated in 100 languages. We are not what you thought. Neither are you. We still carry scars. We still rebuild. But now we do it on our terms. Because we learned something the Seraphim never expected, that being flawed doesn't make us broken. That struggle doesn't mean failure. That freedom, even messy and chaotic and terrifying, is worth the price. We thought we were alone in the universe, doomed to wander the stars without purpose. We thought we needed to be shaped. We thought wrong. Let me know if you'd like a full compiled version or help formatting this into a publishable piece.